Hey Truth Seekers, it's Nathaniel here continuing our strategy series on the different types of cards. Today we are going to be covering story cards and equipment cards. These are very important cards in your deck. I recommend anywhere from 8 to 12 cards of your deck should just be story cards and equipment cards. This is going because you can only play story cards once per turn, and you can only use equipment cards as long as they are attached to an Animo. So, without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and start with these two because these two have a couple similar traits. And these similar traits are the fact that they remove an Animo from your small group. So, start with Paul's Chains. Paul's Chains says, the animal to whom this card is attached cannot be activated, but may be discarded at any time during your setup phase. This allows you to attach Paul's Chains to an Animo and just use Paul's Chains to discard it. However, Paul's Chains has another ability, which is really good. It says, once per turn, as long as this card is attached to an Animo in your small group. You may search your deck for up to 2 level 1 Animo and place them into your small group. If there is no room in your small group, this card has no use. So, attach this to an Animo. Use its ability to grab 2 level 1 Animo. They can even be Ultras. It doesn't have that restriction. But the Animo that this card is attached to can't be activated itself. But you can always discard it to make room for other Animo. And then Peter's Vision says, search your deck for 1 level 1 Animo and exchange it with 1 Animo and any equipment attached from your small group and shuffle it back in your deck. Oftentimes, Carol and I will go ahead and attach Paul's Chains to an Animo, use its ability to put 2 out there, then use Peter's Vision to go grab another Animo, place it into your small group, and you'll shuffle that Animo and Paul's Chains back into your deck that you're exchanging with. So, Peter's Vision and Paul's Chains also search. So I'm going to go ahead and continue going on to the story cards and equipment cards that search. This is Conversion. Conversion says you may discard a Cine from your hand and search your deck for any one virtuous Animo. If you do not have a Cine in your hand, you cannot play this card. Conversion is really good because if you run a deck that primarily focuses on Cine strategies, you can turn Cines into virtuous Animo, which is really great. Next up is our letters. Make sure I get these in order. All right. So, letter F says, search your deck for an Animo that provides a Faith Fellowship bonus. This one says, search your deck for an Animo that provides a Hope Fellowship bonus. This one says, search your deck for a card that provides a Love Fellowship bonus. And this one says, search your deck for a card that provides a Holy Spirit Fellowship bonus. So if you are running a Fellowship-based deck, consider running these cards. If you are using a deck that has a Holy Spirit Fellowship bonus, most of your Holy Spirit do not have Fellowship bonus. So you can use Bible Study Spirit. Search your deck for any one Holy Spirit Animo, reveal it, and put it in your hand, then shuffle your deck afterwards. So you run these cards in your Fellowship decks, and you run this in your Holy Spirit deck, and you basically use them to get whatever cards you need for your primary strategy. Next up is Tough as Nails. If you run a deck that you want to play against Cines, or you don't want to play against Cines, this card's a toss-up for that. If your active Cine spot is empty, you may place this card there. When an opponent reveals a Cine to you, discard this card and search your deck for up to 3 Animo and place them in your hand. Shuffle your deck afterwards. So this helps you, basically, you can either use this card to kind of put a hindrance against your opponent from playing a Cine on you, because then you'll get rewarded if they play a Cine on you. Or if you use a strategy where you want them to play Cines on you, you can use this card as incentive to be like, hey, you play a Cine on me, I'm going to still benefit from this. So that way you don't mind them playing a Cine against you because you get the cards that you need. Next up is Sandcastle. Sandcastle searches your deck for either 1 Ultra or Mega Animo. Very strong, very helpful. Go grab your Ultra Animo or your Mega Cine. Very beneficial. Good Soil. Look at the top 7 cards of your deck and place one Animo you find there in your hand. Shuffle your deck afterwards. So if you are looking for cards that let you find Animo in your deck and add them to your hand or puts them into play, consider running these cards. All right. Next up, we're moving to our cards that interact with power cards. Okay. Indwelling says search your deck for up to 2 Holy Spirit power cards and place them in your hand. Shuffle your deck afterwards. Copper Coin says look at the top 7 cards of your deck. You may place up to 2 power cards you find there directly in your power pool and shuffle your deck. And the Shoes of the Gospel says once per turn, as long as this card is attached to one Animo in your small group, you may look at the top card of your deck. And if that card is a power card, you may place it directly into your power pool. Otherwise, put it back on top of your deck. Not every single deck needs to run these cards to search out power cards. Because there's not one that is in a Faith deck that does that, I would consider running Copper Coins in a Faith deck. This card searches up for only Holy Spirit power cards, so you could run this if you run standard Holy Spirit power cards. Shoes of the Gospel, I recommend run this in a deck that runs Fuzzworm, so that way you can use it, you either hit it or you don't, and then you can just discard it and draw 4 cards. All these interact with power cards. Next up, we are moving on to the story cards and equipment cards that convert, have power conversion. So we have Slumber Tumbler, Breastplate of Righteousness, Frankincense, Gold, and Myrrh. Okay. So, Slumber Tumbler says select one standard power card from your power pool and place it on top. You may not use that power card this turn. On your following turn, that power card may be used twice. So this kind of makes a standard power into a double power. It's pretty good. Breastplate of Righteousness. Every faith cost associated with the animal to whom this card is attached now becomes a universal cost. Any faith, love, or Holy Spirit costs now become hope costs. All right. And so it converts hope into universal and anything else other than universal into hope. Frankincense says if the animal to whom this card is attached has any faith discard cost, they may convert it into a faith cost instead. Gold says if the animal to whom this card is attached has any faith return costs, hope return costs, they may convert it to a hope cost instead. So that way you don't have to discard your power card and you don't have to shuffle your power card back for these. And then Myrrh. Myrrh actually says, when attached to an animal, this card reduces that cost by 1 power. So now the power of the animal this card is attached to is reduced by a Holy Spirit. So this is great at making like Nico Ultra into a 0 cost, or Draylight into just 2 universal, which you can just use a fasting to pay for. So these cards all help convert your costs into universal, reduces it, or you don't have to discard or shuffle them back. And this card makes it into a double. Next up is our story cards that recycle. First off, we have the Runaway and Shake and Break. Then we have Helmet of Salvation and Peter's Sandals. Runaway, select any Animo in your discard pile, return it to your hand. Shake and Break, return 2 level 1 Animo from your discard pile to your hand. This card is great if you're running if your strategy focuses on ultras or they focus on level 2s and level 3s. Shake and Break is great because in fellowship decks, because a lot of your fellowships are like level 1s. And so you get to, or you focus on level 1 strategies. And so consider running either of these based on those kind of strategies. Helmet of Salvation says, when the Animo to whom this card is attached is discarded, discard this card instead and return that Animo to your hand. Peter's Sandals. When the Animo to whom this card is attached is discarded, discard this card and shuffle that Animo back into your deck. So, this returns the Animo to your hand. This one shuffles it back into your deck. Both of these are really good. This card can't be attached to an Ultra Animo, but this card can. So, you pick and choose what you have. I usually use Peter Sandals in a Fuzzworm deck, so that way I can discard it. A lot of my more not super efficient equipment, I like running with Fuzzworm, so that way Fuzzworm can discard it if it's not necessary. All right. Moving on to our story cards that draw. If you are looking for cards that draw you cards, we have the Rich Fool, which draws the bottom 3 cards of your deck. Hidden Treasure, which says place 1 card from the bottom of your hand to the bottom of your deck. If you do, you get to draw 3 cards. Fishing Nets, which says draw 2 cards. If this card was the last card in your hand, you draw 4 cards instead. And finally, the Bell of Truth. Bell of Truth is very interesting because it can only be attached to a love Animo, not only. If it is attached to a love Animo, you get to instantly draw 2 cards. Then it has an ability that says, once per turn, as long as this card is attached to any Animo, you may, when you have it attached to an Animo that's in play, you may peek at the top 4 cards of your deck and return them to the top of your deck in any order. This is really great, especially in, say, like a Love and Hope Fellowship deck, because you'll attach this to a Love Animo, draw 2 cards, and you look at the top 4 cards of the deck, choose which one you want on top of your deck, then play Socro and draw that 1 card. It's very helpful. All right, next up, if you are just looking for cards that generically look for cards, we have Snakebit, which says playing this card forfeits your scoring phase. Return your hand to your deck, and you may select any 4 cards from your deck and place them in your hand. Shuffle your deck, and your turn immediately ends. So this grabs you any 4 cards in your deck. It's really strong, but you do skip out in your scoring phase. And sometimes missing 1 scoring phase is just enough to lose the game. But it is also very powerful to get you any 4 cards that you need. So it's a great first couple turns play. I wouldn't play it really beyond that. Answer Prayers. Look at the bottom 5 cards of your deck. Put 1 in your hand and return the rest to the bottom of your deck in any order you want. So basically, you get to look at the bottom 5, add a card to your hand, then rearrange the bottom cards of your deck. So that's really great. Lost and Found. It's like a mini Snakebit. It says search your deck for any 1 card, reveal it to your opponent, and place it in your hand. You may not play or discard that card this turn. So you get a card for next turn. Then, like a good neighbor, you may give 2, 4, or 6 virtue points of your total score to a single opponent. For every 2 points you give away, search your deck for any card, up to 3 cards. And then place them in your hand. Shuffle your deck afterwards. You cannot give more points than you currently have. So this card, you sacrifice your points up to 6, and then for every 2 points you gave away, you search your deck for any card and add it to your hand. So you can grab up to three cards in exchange for 6 points. Sometimes that's enough, but kind of like Snakebit, comes at the cost of your points. So keep that in mind. So these are the cards that search for any card. Next up, we are looking at cards that affect growth. All right, we got Ascension. You may skip 1 growth stage this turn. And that is defined as, if you have a level 2, you may place it directly into your small group. If you have a level 3, you may place it directly onto a level 1 of the same Animo. So you get to either skip your level 2 or skip your level 1. It's pretty good. Mustard Seed says you can discard 2 cards from your hand. Search your deck for up to 2 growth stages for an Animo in your small group and grow that Animo. Shuffle your deck. If you don't have 2 cards in your hand, discard and you can't play this card. So in Animo, I really feel like there aren't a whole lot of cards that you don't want to play. And so Mustard Seed is kind of difficult because now you're discarding 2 cards that you consider useless at this point in time to just go straight into a level 2 or level 3. It's still really strong. I personally have kind of gone away from Mustard Seed in favor of Ascension. Next up is cards that affect virtue points. So here are equipment cards that affect some virtue points, and they are Broken Jar. When this card is attached to an Animo, it increases the activation cost by 1 universal power. The Animo to whom this card is attached gains 5 virtue points when activated. So for an additional cost, you get 5 more virtue points, which is actually really good considering the fact that Faith and Hope's 5s require 5 virtue point Animo, require you to shuffle or discard the power card. And this one is just like, get an extra cost, gain 5 points. Tools of the Trade. The love Animo to whom this card is attached gets 2 virtue points when activated. If it's activated against a Cine, the Animo gains 4 virtue points instead. So this is really good. And Sword of the Spirit. The Holy Spirit animal to whom this card is attached gains 3 virtue points. Really take this into consideration because that means that extra universal cost, you sometimes feel bad, or the lower power cards, you kind of just feel bad for for either costing too much or not having enough virtue points on it. No, this card is why, because you get to attach it and you can turn that 13 Draylight into a 16 Draylight. And it doesn't add an additional cost like Broken Jar does. But Broken Jar does give more virtue points, so take that into consideration. And then finally, we get to cards that provide protection. Okay? So these are the story and equipment cards that provide protection. The Faith Animo to which this card is attached is not affected by the abilities or actions of Cinis. Also, as long as this card remains in play, your power cards are protected against the actions of your opponent's story cards or Cinis. So, power cards and Cinis do not affect the Shield of Faith, or the Faith Animo this card is attached to. Your power cards are protected, the Animo is protected, it's good. The original Shield of Faith also prevented them from like activating Animo, a Cini against you, but that's why we have Judge Weed now. Alright, Beautiful Gate says choose one of the following. Remove a hindrance from your active Cini, or ignore any effects of your active Cini's ability for the turn. These are really great and extremely beneficial in helping you protect your own cards. Alright, so anyways, we're going to go ahead and end on this note. So these are the cards and how we've categorized them in what cards you use where. Alright, you need cards that search, you need cards that draw, you need cards that affect your power cards, you need cards that recycle your Animo. You need cards that interact with your growth if you run a growth strategy. And you can consider running cards that affect your virtue points overall. Okay? So just keep that in mind. Typically, Carol and I, we will run 2 to 3 cards that search for Animo, 2 to 3 cards that draw Animo, and 2 to 3 cards that recycle Animo. And then we go ahead and try and run some equipment that match our Animo. So we'll run 2 equipment cards for our primary kind of Animo and 2 equipment cards that work with our secondary kind of Animo. And sometimes, and oftentimes, not sometimes, oftentimes, we will also throw in Peter's Vision and Paul's Chains, so that way we can interact with our small group a lot more. Next set, the next expansion, Fearless, we've had a spoiler for a card called Scarlet, the Scarlet Cord, which allows you to attach it, the Animo that it's attached to, you get to either return it to your hand or discard it. If you discard it, you get to search your deck for an Animo that has virtue points equal to the virtue points of the card that you discarded. So Scarlet Thread is going to be very welcomed in our decks, and it isn't specified by kind. Anyways, we're going to bring this video to a close. So in the meantime, Truth Seekers, keep learning virtues and defeating Cinis.